Hi, this is John Wentworth. Not all recruiting is equal. Some works well, delivering great candidates on time and for a reasonable price. Other recruiting does not. The difference between the two is how the work is done. The litmus test of good recruiting is getting good hires. What is a good hire? Well, partly it's the outcome, long term, stable, and productive employees. Partly it's how the getting of those hires fits into the organization. If any of those does not work correctly, good hires will not happen. This is all fine, but who cares? Why is making good hires important? It's important because good hires get you long term, stable, and highly productive employees. To make a good hire, you must be sure you're looking for the right characteristics, skills, and experiences. You can build your requirements in two ways. First, you can just look at the job and do a job analysis, determining piece by piece what candidates need to bring to the job to be successful. Alternatively, if you have a population of employees who do this job, you can look at what the successful ones look like and compare that to what the less successful ones look like, and then hire new employees who look like your top performers and don't look like your bottom performers. You can figure out what top performers look like by breaking up the job into each of its parts. ONET, O-N-E-T online.org, is a Department of Commerce tool that has descriptions of virtually every job in the U.S. and lots of information about each of the skill, experience, and characteristics requirements of each. Whether you use ONET or not, you need to break the job into its parts, making sure that each part contributes to the success of someone in that job. Then, if you have a population of people doing the job, you identify what the successful ones look like. To establish a success profile, first you need to gather a lot of information about your workforce. High-end consulting firms will charge you hundreds of thousands of dollars for competency studies. You don't need to do that. You can just establish a list of skills, experiences, and competencies and interview each incumbent against that list, getting a numeric score. When you lay the employee profiles side by side, you can start to see what the top performers have in common. The experiences, skills, and characteristics that top performers have in common that the bottom performers do not have in common represent the success differentiators. And you can hire to that profile, making sure your hires have the top performer characteristics. By hiring to the profile, you can increasingly, over time, duplicate your top performers. If the characteristics you identified are in fact the predictive characteristics, you should then be increasingly duplicating your top performer's performance. Here's a real life example of how this works. The red items on the right are the parts of the job that the top and lower performers have in approximately equal measure. The green items on the left are those in which the top performers have higher scores. These are the critical performance differentiators. The differentiators were not obvious or intuitive, so this company was stuck. The methodology made clear what the company should be looking for to get the success that they needed in this job. So our job design needs to specify the success profile we've just seen, but it also needs to specify the characteristics of individuals who actually exist, are available, and want the job. Hiring managers wanting PhDs in a subject in which PhDs are not granted, or who want another combination of skills that just don't exist, will create confusion, delays, expense, and frustration. It's the recruiter's job to identify the situation if it exists and communicate it to the hiring manager. But the recruiter needs data. Having a hard time finding people is not conclusive. The problem might be less than thorough recruiting. Scouring the labor market and documenting what is there improves the chances of being right and improves confidence in the recruiter. Here's a sample tool that can be used. We received a job description that was so broad and comprehensive, it seemed to be for an entire department, not just one job. We went to the internet and found 30 plus resumes that had information about all of the requirements contained in the job description. These are listed down the left side. The scores against the requirements run across in the rows. The individuals whose qualifications we are displaying are in the columns. So dark green is more than what the company wants. Green indicates the candidate has what the company wants, and red means that they have less than what the company wants, requirement by requirement. You can see that the most qualified individual, the person on the farthest left column, is missing 4 major qualifications. The candidates to the right have even less. This job cannot be filled without breaking it up into 2 or more separate jobs. Your job needs to be designed so that you can and are willing to pay what it takes to get the results, experiences, and characteristics you want. If you do not have your desire and your willingness to pay the cost lined up, once again, frustration will descend upon you. Here is how the cost picture looks. This tool displays how much proficiency you get for varying levels of money. In this tool, how qualified candidates are is plotted across the horizontal axis. The farther a dot is to the right, the more qualified the person is. The candidate's compensation is plotted on the vertical axis. So the farthest left dot on the graph shows a person whose performance is about 1.5 out of 5, not too good, and they cost around $90,000. This graph shows that if you want a performance average rating of around 3, you have to pay $100,000 or more. If you want that level of performance for $50,000, you're out of luck. But with these data, as before, you can make sensible and informed decisions about what to do. The next task that the job design must accomplish is to make sure that the job is one that your qualified candidates want. We knew an IT company that had a very bad reputation, so bad in fact that everyone knew about it and no one would work there. Their solution was to change the name of the company. Not a good response. Rather than that, you can perform some simple and basic research to understand why candidates you want do not want your job, and then craft a meaningful fix. In this situation, programmers did not want a job in Portland, Oregon. They were in cities other than Portland and didn't want to move, as attractive as the relocation package was. We gathered information about what they wanted and did not want in the course of interviewing them, and came to understand that they were just afraid to move to a new job with a new company in a new city in the middle of a recession. The risk in their minds was just too great that the company would crater and they would be stuck in Portland with no job. The VP of HR solved the problem by offering 2-year contracts. He would not have known to do this without the research. Why does the job profile matter? It allows you to duplicate your top performers, keeps you from spinning your wheels with searches that cannot be successful, and reduces the level of aggravation associated with recruiting. The best candidates run through the wrong process will not become good hires. By process, we mean the steps you take to fill a job. Those steps can be organized and informed by data, or they can be disorganized and informed by guesses. We will not spend a lot of time on the management of the recruiting process, but we'll make these points. A disciplined process can cause jobs to be filled on time. Why is this important? Because work needs to be done for the company to be healthy, and you cannot do the work without the right people. With the right people on board at the right time, the work gets done on time. A disciplined process can produce jobs filled for a reasonable cost. This is an entire discussion by itself, but for today's purpose, we just need to know that it can cost too much or it can cost an appropriate amount. A disciplined process can produce recruiting that costs an appropriate amount of money. A disciplined process that delivers results in an orderly way removes an irritant from the lives of recruiting's internal customers. Happy internal customers make for a more productive organization, plus happier working conditions and a better professional advancement for those associated with the recruiting effort. A professor at Chapman University some years ago correlated candidates liking the recruiter with their accepting offers. Candidates infer that they will be treated no better on the job than they are treated during the courtship of recruiting. If you want your candidates to want your jobs, your process needs to be considerate and comfortable for them. Lastly, on process. The process must drive partnership. Each person has a role and an obligation to perform their role well. If every team member does his or her job well, the process will hum. A recruiting process to deliver good hires must be orderly and disciplined. If it is, your recruiting can fill jobs on time so your work gets done on time, controls the cost of recruiting, and reduces organizational discord. The end result of Next Practices recruiting is long term, stable, and highly productive employees. We told you that we would cover these elements of a good hire. You now have the tools to evaluate each hire and see if it's good or not, and more importantly, guidelines for how you can make sure that your hires are good. I hope you've enjoyed this and found it useful. Please feel free to call me at 310 732 2301 if you have any questions or would like to talk about this. Thank you so much. This is John Wentworth. Goodbye for now.